Alright, well, a couple little disclaimers at the beginning here. One, I've never taught any kind of class before. Taught the Word of God. This is a little bit different. So bear with me, I'm going to be new at this just like you guys are going to be new at Greek. Second, I want to clarify from the beginning, I'm not an expert in Greek. I wish I was, and hopefully I'm on my way there and will be one day. But here's what I know about Greek. A little more than you. So that's all I need to be able to teach you. In order to teach someone, you just have to know more than the person you're teaching. And so I know enough to teach you guys what I know. My goal for this summer is that you guys would be able to read from your Greek New Testaments with minimal help from the aid of a lexicon, either online or hardcover lexicon. Now, lexicon is what you use to look up words in the Greek and what they mean in English. And so that's the goal, and not to look up every word, but to look up maybe be where I am right now, which is when I read from my Greek New Testament, I look up maybe a word every couple sentences. And so that's where I hope to get you guys to. You may not quite be that far, maybe a word every sentence, but still, that would be pretty good. That would be a huge victory. Being able to read in Greek has changed my life, my devotional life. I no longer read, I told Mitchell this, but I no longer read at all from the English New Testaments, except if I have to maybe find something quickly. But when it comes to my devotions, I do them entirely from the original languages. I'm not quite as good at Hebrew as I am in Greek, so that's a little harder. But once you learn how to do this, you'll never want to go back. There's just no comparison. So, let's take a look at the syllabus together. Week 1, it's not like an in-depth syllabus, it's more of an overview of what we're going to do in this class. So week 1 is today, it's going to be letters and sounds. Actually, today's lesson is going to be divided in half. The first half is going to be more like, let me see if that's Chad. No, it's not Chad. First half is going to be encouragement for why you should not quit this summer. And the second half of the class, we're actually going to get into the letters and the sounds. Then the rest of this is going to sound pretty confusing to you because most of us don't know English grammar well. That's one of the biggest challenges that we're going to face in learning Greek, is that the great majority of us don't understand how the English language functions. And so we don't know what participles are in English, we don't know what infinitives are in English and all these things, and so when we're learning them in Greek it's even harder. We have to learn what they are in English first. So if most of the rest of this doesn't make sense to you, it's okay, we'll learn it as we go. But I'm just going to give the next 2 weeks. Next week on May 19th, we're going to do present and future active indicative verbs. In other words, you're going to learn how to speak in the present, how to read the present and the future tenses, and then in verbs. And then the week after that, May 26th, we're going to learn nouns, adjectives, and prepositions, how those work. And here's why we're doing it like that, because then we're going to miss 3 class periods. I'm going to be on vacation, then we're going to have youth camp, then we're going to have children's camp. So that's why it was imperative for us to start today. Okay? Because during that month off, you're going to have a lot of homework and a lot to memorize, vocabulary-wise. So during those 3 weeks, you'll actually have 3 different homework assignments and memorization assignments. So you'll need that time. But here's the good thing. Because we will have learned the alphabet, verbs, and nouns, adjectives, and prepositions, you will be translating complete sentences during that time. You will already be translating complete sentences out of Greek on May 26th. That should be exciting to you. All right? Learning to read a language is completely different than learning to speak it. Let me clarify. We are not here to learn to speak Greek. No one cares if you can speak Greek. I don't care. You shouldn't care. Right? You're not learning how to write Greek. Okay? You're not going to be. Are any of you going to become Greek scribes? Raise your hand. All right? I didn't think so. If you're not going to be a scribe, you don't have to learn to write Greek. All you have to be able to do is read it, and that is very easy compared to speaking and writing. Right? That means you don't even have to be able to reproduce these forms. You just have to be able to recognize them. And so that's the goal. You're not going to write a Greek character this summer if you don't want to. All right? I don't care if you know how to write it. I don't care if you know how to pronounce it. We're not even going to focus on proper pronunciation. I don't care. All right? So that's the goal. The goal is to learn to, we can turn down to your lesson plan, the goal is to learn to read Greek. And that is not even an end in itself. Okay, this is important. We're not doing this to puff ourselves up with knowledge. The end is not just to be able to read Greek. We want to learn to read Greek in order that we can read the Bible, God's Word. It was originally written in mainly 2 languages with a few short sections in Aramaic. And those are the languages that I think every Christian should learn in order that we can actually read the Word of God. Alright, so I've got a little spiel here that I wrote most of it out. I'm going to kind of use it as points as I go through it. That introductory paragraph, you can look there. It says, no 2 languages are exactly alike. Therefore, there is no such thing as a perfect translation. Here's what I mean by that. No 2 languages are the same language that just have different sounds to mean the same things. That's not how languages work. Languages actually evolve from the way that people think, the way that a culture, like for example, in the ancient, not the ancient Near East, but in the modern Southeast, Therefore, we must be very careful about which translations we read. Right? When you're reading someone's translation of the Greek or Hebrew scriptures, you're reading their interpretation. So their theology, their doctrine, all of that is very much going to come into play in how they translate. And so you're reading someone else's interpretation of that Greek and of that Hebrew. So if they're not solid, if they're not doctrinally solid, if they're not theologically solid, then you're reading a bad interpretation of Scripture. And sometimes, even if they are solid, it turns out bad, unfortunately. All right, next point. Every translation has to balance literality and comprehensibility. All right? How literal do I want to be versus how readable do I want to be? That's the question that all translators are having to balance as they do their work, right? And that's the question you guys are going to have to learn to balance as you translate Greek in the sentences and the verses that we're going to be translating. Because if you translate word for word, what's called an interlinear translation, just one word, one word, one word for the closest English word, it's going to be the choppiest thing you could ever imagine. You have to have some kind of flexibility to put it into a readable English. And so as these interpreters, as these translators are translating, they're having to pick how much do I want to make this into an easily readable text, and how much do I want to make this reflect a more word-for-word literal translation of the Greek text. Okay? So here is where the different translations fall along that line, right? Translations like the Message, the New Living Translation, they say we want to be as readable as possible. And so they make it as modern English as possible, as readable as possible, but the result is that the Greek is very much skewed. It is by no means a clear-cut or an accurate or literal translation of the Greek text. Now, translations like the NIV, it aims to be both. NIV, it's not as skewed as the Message would be, but it's still very readable. Now, you got versions on the other hand like the ESV and the NASB, right? These versions try to be as literal as possible, and sometimes, especially the NASB, which is probably the most literal translation, most word-for-word translations, the NASB, sometimes it's very difficult to read. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. But that's because the Greek just doesn't translate well to English there. And they're saying instead of paraphrasing the text, we're going to just translate it as best we can in a literal word-for-word manner. Right? And so the question is, how pre-digested do you want your Bible? Right? When you're picking your version, you're saying, how much do I want someone else to take this word and interpret it for me? Whereas, how much do I want to have to interpret myself? That's the question you're asking when you're choosing your translation. Who's going to be my interpreter? And so, do I want to eat, because the Word of God is our food, right? Do I want to eat food that's been chewed up and like baby bird style, like spit into my mouth, right? Or do I want to eat more like a steak, something that's harder to chew, takes a longer to digest, but all the nutrients in the meat are still there because it's a more accurate rendition? Does that make sense? That's the best analogy that I can think of. Alright, so here's our goal though. Our goal is to not eat pre-digested food at all. Our goal is to not read pre-interpreted text. Our goal is to do the interpreting ourselves, right? Because we don't know these people who translated, and sometimes they do a bad job. And so I'm going to give you some examples of that this morning, and they should make you angry. I get angry when I talk about this stuff. I'm very passionate about these bad translations, these poor things. And so that's what we're about to go on to look at. But just keep in mind the goal. The goal is not, I want to be able to read the original languages because that would be a little more cool. The goal is for the very first time for you to read the Bible. You have never really read the Bible. Is that scary? It should be a little scary to you. You have never read the Bible. You have read someone's interpretation. Now, maybe a light interpretation, but it's still been interpreted. I want you to read the Bible. Alright? Alright, let's look at some examples here. Let's start by being easy on these translators. Let's go for examples of necessary interpretation or good interpretation in the process of translation. Right? The first point, you see the original languages leave words out. And I would add to that, which I didn't get to add to your things, you can add, it also adds words. The original language often adds words that don't translate well into English, and reorders words, or orders words strangely, you could put. And so we have to, this requires us to either add words, take away words, or reorder words in order to make it flow or make it make sense in English. Alright? First point here, John 1:1. I gave you the Greek. You'll be able to read that very, very soon. Alright, follow with me. You see that word en? Right? You see it? Beginning? In the Greek? Oh, I forget that y'all can't, that V is an N. Okay, that V is an N. Okay? So that says en. That means in, arche means beginning. So literally it says in beginning or in a beginning. There's no article there. In beginning, en halagas was the word. Kai halagas en prospantheon. And the word was with the God. There is an article before that word, God. That ton is an article. Then the last phrase there is Kai theos en halagas. And God was the Word. Alright? Here's what translators have done to make, because let me read that one more time in English if you translated it word for word literally. In a beginning was the Word, and the Word was with the God, and God was the Word. Right? It's choppy, it's weird, and some things just don't make sense with those articles. And so here's what they've done. Ready? They've added an article before beginning. Because what Greek does is very often when it's assumed that there's only one of something, it just leaves the article out. Because it assumes the reader knows there's only one of it. There's only one beginning. Okay? And so it just leaves the article out. It figures you know it's got to be the beginning. Right? If it's in beginning, it's got to be the beginning. And so they leave it out. So it is a good translation to supply a the, because in English, in beginning makes no sense. But in Greek, it makes sense. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes when they add words, it's a necessary interpretation. It's good interpretation. But the problem is most versions, they don't indicate anything to tell people that that's been added. The NASB does. The NASB puts words in italics if they've been added. If you're reading your NASB Bible and you see italics, it's because it was not in the original languages. And you'll see it all the time, almost every couple verses. But the ESV doesn't in most cases. And so the ESV, you have no idea which words are added and which words are not. So in the beginning, that's an example of good interpretation right there, or good translation, was the Word, and the Word was with the God. Why there's an article here? You could probably read tons of books to tell you. I think it's because it's emphasizing the one true God. But still, in English, we don't say with the God. And so people take that out because when we put God with a capital G, that's how we indicate the one true God. We use a capital G instead of a little g. And so that's an example of a good translation, even though it takes away an article from the Greek. And then the last phrase there, it says, and God, kai theos, theos is God, theology. Right? Didn't I tell you there was cognates? Right? That means words that sound similar. Theos is God. That's where we get the study of God, theology. Alright, so kai theos and halagos, and God was the Word. In Greek, whenever you have a to be verb, which is that was there, that en, that it doesn't look like en to you, I know, en to you, but it does to me. The little word with the V on the end, and it looks like a funky looking en at the beginning. Okay? Whenever you have that kind of word, you have two words that are subjects. That's the God and the Word, the theos and the logos. The one with the article is the subject of the sentence, and the other one is the predicate nominative. And so the logos, even though it comes last, you see logos? Everyone's following me? Does anyone see logos there at the end? Yes? Following me or no? Does anyone not see it? Okay. That is the subject because it has the article and God does not. And so even though the Greek order is God was the Word, in English we know which one is the subject, so we flip the word order. So see, in that one sentence, I've given you an example of an added article, an article taken away, and a word order that's been reversed. And those are all good translation, good interpretations, in my opinion, in order to make it make sense in English. Now, Greek word order puts important things first in the sentence, not the subject. In English, we put subject, verb, object. Mitchell drank the tea, right? Mitchell's the subject, drank is the verb, the tea is the direct object. Am I right?
Right.
Okay? In Greek, no. It's the important things come first. Word order is by importance. And so the important thing in this sentence is what? God, that Jesus was God. Right? That's where the emphasis should be on God. So just by, if you know Greek, you can tell it's not, and God was the Word. It's not the Word was God. It's, and the Word was God. All right? This is an amazing sentence. John is exclaiming the deity of Christ in the first sentence of his gospel. The Word was God. The Word was, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. All right? You ever heard that preacher, forget his name, there's this black preacher preaches on BET, and he goes, and God!
TDJ?
What is it?
TDJ?
Yes!
Big old...
I love the way
You gotta get the thing out, wipe your head real quick.
Yeah, personal prayer package. He gives away these personal prayer packages. Personal prayer package. That's how he says it. Anyway, pretty funny stuff. All right. Good stuff. So that's some examples of good translation. Here's another reason why you need good why sometimes you have to interpret and pick a word. Is because, like I said earlier, words have multiple meanings. Okay, so John 1:5. It says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it, in the ESV. In the NASB, it says, the light shines in the darkness did not comprehend it. That's because that particular Greek word can mean either one. It can mean overcome, or it can mean comprehend. And so, what do? You have to try and pick one. You just have to try and figure out which one does he mean. You have to interpret what is he saying to pick which one he means. I've recently been translating the Gospel of John, and I picked grasp. I think it's saying that the darkness was not able to... No. I did not. I put extinguish, with grasp being the alternate translation. I put extinguish because I think it's saying the light is shining and the darkness can't put it out. So see, I had to interpret what I think the text is meaning in order to pick that translation. But then in my translation, I put a footnote, and at the bottom I put or, grasp it, understand it. And I think the NASB does that too. It puts a footnote and it puts the alternate meaning at the bottom, but most versions don't. That's good. That is a good example of translation. And so sometimes you just got to pick. It's got to be one or the other. You know, pastor does this a lot. He'll say this could be this, this, or this. It means all three. Or it could mean all three, right? He's very honest about it. And so that's just the way it is. Sometimes we just don't know. All right, now let me get to the stuff that's going to get under your skin. Here's some examples of unnecessary or bad interpretation in the process of translation. 1, translators leave out and add words unnecessarily. So we just looked at some necessary times to add and leave out words, but sometimes it's done unnecessarily. The ESV version of 1 Samuel 17:5 says he had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. By the way, most of your examples I picked are from the New Testament and from Greek, but there's just a couple Old Testament ones here at the beginning. What's the problem with that sentence there, 1 Samuel 17:5? Does anyone remember from when I preached on David and Goliath? John, you remember?
Isn't it that it's talking about scales, which goes back to Genesis and talks about the serpent, and what's the connection between the two?
That's my interpretation, but there's no doubt that the word scale armor is in there. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Look at the NASB version. 1 Samuel 17:5. And he had a bronze helmet on his head. He was clothed with scale armor, which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. For some reason, the ESV thought the word, the adjective that means scales, in Hebrew, wasn't important enough to render being written in English. I have no idea why. Right? It's just a bad translation. They just leave a word out. It clearly says it is scale armor. Scale armor. And they say, no, that's not important. We won't translate it. That should upset you. That is an unfaithful translation of the original text. And you would have no idea if the NASB hadn't gotten it right, and if you couldn't read, or if you couldn't read Hebrew. Right? So fortunately, most versions don't don't do something that bad as to just leave a word out. But sometimes they do it, and it is wrong, it's unfaithful, and it's a great motivation to learn the original languages so that you're not at the mercy of your translators. Next example, Genesis 4:1. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. The guy preached on this, Claude preached on this Wednesday night, this passage, if you guys were there. It was a great, pretty good sermon, I thought. Adam knew his wife Eve, she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Claude read from the NASB, which said, now the man had a relationship with his wife Eve, she conceived and gave birth to Cain, and she said, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. Which version do you think is better?
The ESV.
The ESV? I agree with you. Except the NASB did something right too. What did the NASB do right? Look closely.
Italicized.
Good. It added italics because the word the help of is not in the original text. In the original text it says, look at the King James Version. King James Version actually did the best on this one. That's why I included it. It says, Adam knew his wife Eve, which by the way is literally what it says, not had relations. It says knew, and she conceived and bare Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. That's what it says. It just says from the Lord. The with the help of is added. NASB thought it was necessary to add the help of, so they put in italics. ESV added it and just said, just let people think it's in there. Right? And so the NASB did better in that regard. But the problem with the NASB is that it doesn't say child anywhere in that text. It says man. I have gotten a man. That's why the ESV gets it right and the King James Version gets it right. Why did the NASB add the word child?
Make it easier to read.
Do you think we're too stupid to understand what she meant by saying a man?
I think you're exactly right. You're both exactly right. They thought people are not going to understand why she would say a man. Right? Why would she say about a little baby, I have gotten a man? Right? And so let's just call it a man. Just add child to the end of man, which just makes it seem like this honking baby. Right? I mean, it just actually ruins the English translation, but in an attempt to make it better. Right? Just say what the text says. Okay? And so but when you look at it rightly, when you leave it as it is, then it lets people start putting things together. Then we would ask, why does it say man? And we would say, oh wait. Could this be referring to the promise made in Genesis 3:15, where he says, your seed will crush the serpent? Could Eve already be thinking, this is the Messiah, this is the promised one? She wouldn't have called it Messiah because they didn't have anointing yet. Messiah means anointed one. But could this be the promised one? Eve, I believe, was already looking for the seed, the man who would come and crush the serpent. And she thought Cain was that man. And so it shows how from the beginning of time, people have been waiting for this promised one. But if you change it to man-child, you ruin everything. Much like if you leave out scale, right, from the example we looked at before. Because I believe that was a deliberate reference made to draw us back to the serpent in the garden, right, covered in scales. Also because the word translated here, we're going to look at it later, but the word bronze sounds exactly like serpent. And so I think we're supposed to think of the serpent here and picture that battle going on between the serpent and the seed of the woman when we read David and Goliath. You miss that when you leave scale out. And so these are not harmless mistakes. These mistakes affect our theology. They affect our ability to draw out everything from the text. All right? And I just think it's so funny that King James Version gets it right on both accounts. Right? They translate man right and they don't add anything to it. They just say from the Lord. I think that's great. I mean, and we're going to look at another one where the King James gets it right. Because the King James is very literal. And so they oftentimes do get it right. All right. It's just impossible to read, right? All right. Number 2. Translators change the meaning of words. One example I found as I was doing my translating from John last night, which is not in there, is that whenever very often, the word he will be used repetitively to talk about both. If God is interacting with man, it will be used for God and man. And he told him, right? He told him, God told man. Like for example, if sentence 1 is God told Abraham to go into the land of Canaan, then the next sentence will say, and he obeyed him, right? It will use he for both people. So what translators often do is they fill in Abraham for one of those he's. And Abraham obeyed him, or and Abraham obeyed God. So they're telling you which one is referring to Abraham, which one's referring to God, instead of you letting you just determine it by yourself. Anyway, that was just one I came across in the book of Hebrews actually this morning as me and Amber were doing a Bible study. So I throw that in there. But let's look at the ones I already wrote down for you. Genesis 4:7. If you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. This was also in the sermon from the other night. NASB is very similar. It says sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it. Don't read the next one. Who have I talked to about this one yet? Don't read the next one. John, look up. Have I talked to you? Have I told y'all what's the matter with this verse? What does ESV and NASB do wrong? It's a pronoun issue. That word, its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. That word is not it. That word is not a neuter pronoun. Neuter means having no gender. The word it is a neuter pronoun in English. It is a masculine singular pronoun. Masculine singular. It should be translated like the King James translates it. Look at the King James. If you do not, or if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be what? His. That is an accurate translation. His desire. That is a masculine singular pronoun. But you must rule over him. Why do you think they changed it to it when it does not say it?
Because there's no antecedent?
There's no masculine singular and antecedent in this pronoun. The antecedent is sin. Right? Listen. Sin is a feminine word in Hebrew. It is not a masculine. That means that this his is not referring to sin. And it's not referring to sin's desire, because desire is also feminine. So what is the antecedent? If they would have translated it right, if you read it in King James, you're forced to ask, who is the his? What are our options? Who are the masculine singulars we've met in Genesis chapter 3? We've met God, which Elohim is actually a masculine plural word. We won't go into that. We met Adam. That's a masculine singular. Do either of those fit the context? Who's the other masculine singular we've met?
Satan.
The serpent. Satan he hasn't been given a name yet, but the serpent is a masculine word. And so, what do? We're forced to read this differently. The him, in my opinion, the only option it can be is the serpent. And the serpent and Satan's desire is for you. And you must rule over him. That changes things, doesn't it? Makes it very different. And so, this is sinful, in my opinion. This is a sinful translation to say it, because that is not what it says. And so, you've probably read that verse 1,000,000 times, and you've never you've never truly read it before, until now. Pretty good, pretty cool stuff, and sad stuff at the same time. All right.
So which word would you change out for serpent? The first his?
No. You don't put serpent in there, you just put his instead of its. You put his, and you let the people figure it out. Hey,
Like the King James version?
It gets it right. I could be wrong. It could be something other than serpent. We could look for another antecedent, but that's just the only one that makes sense to me. But at least I get the chance to look for one if it says his. If it says its, I don't get that chance to search the scriptures and study them. All right, another one. Now we're to the New Testament, and we're pretty much going to stay in the New Testament. Mark 6:39. This is one of my favorites. I think I may have shared this with some of you. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. ESV. Bad translation. All right? NASB gets out a little bit better. And he commanded them all to recline by groups on the green grass. What do you think is wrong about the ESV that's a little bit better in the NASB? I'll tell you, the verb that's translated in ESV to sit, it does not mean to sit. It never means to sit. It always means to lie down. To lie down. Or you could word it, you could call it reclining. But reclining is how they used to eat. They used to eat like this. Right? Seriously, you see those paintings of the Greeks and the Romans, right, eating their grapes laying down like this? Okay, that's how they used to eat. They used to lie down to eat. It's weird. Okay, I know. But NASB is okay. Recline, I'll take that. But sit, no, it does not mean sit. Now hold on a second. Let's word this rightly. And Jesus, because that's who he's talking about there, Jesus commanded them to lie down by groups on the green grass. Does that change things? Why is that significant? Why does this little harmless change?
Is it reference to in the Psalms?
Which one?
To lie down in
23?
green pastures.
He makes me lie down in green pastures. Psalm 23. Mark was deliberately pointing people to Jesus as the fulfillment of Psalm 23. And we totally miss it when you change that word. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that show how important it is to get it right? What is ESV thinking? Oh, they won't understand if we put lie down. Why would he make them lie down? No, just tell me what it says. Don't interpret it for me. Just you blew it. You ruined that verse, ESV. Congratulations. How awesome is that? He commands it. Why else do you think Mark makes a point to say the green grass? How many descriptions of the grass do you get in Scripture? I think this is the only one, other than in James where it says, like the flower of the field which withers, right, and falls away. But he's making a point about how it goes away. You don't get colors very often in Scripture. This is obviously, he commanded them to lie down in the green grass. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Anyway, so, destroy. All right, next one. 1 Peter 2:16. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. NASB gets it a little better. Act as free men. Do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bondslaves of God. This is one me and Chris talked about recently when we were going to help Rod move. All right, this is one that has become more famous thanks to some high-profile people pointing out the mistake. John MacArthur, right? Slave, right? This word does not mean servant. This word does not mean servant. This word translated servant in the ESV means slave. Listen, that changes things. If it says live as people who are free, but not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants, it does not capture the force of the meaning as same as when you say as slaves. He's purposely trying to give a paradox here. You are free and you are slaves at the same time. He's not saying you're free and you're servants. Right? Servants are still free. That doesn't capture the paradox. The contrast here is between a free man and a slave. And so why should we not use our freedom as a covering for evil? Because we are actually slaves of God. And so it carries deep theological significance when you consider yourself a slave and not a servant. It changes the way we live. So that's another important big mess up. It doesn't mean bond slave either. It just means slave. Right? And in this case, they changed the meaning in order to avert controversy. Slave is a hot topic, hot button issue. It's a bad word today because of our nation's history with slavery. And so they say, let's not go there, let's not offend anyone, let's just call it servant. That is butchering the word of God in order to not offend people. That is wrong. Alright? Alright, and then the last category we've got here is things that are just lost in translation. And one that, as I was translating John last night, came up that's not in your notes, is the fact that there's no quotation marks in the ancient Greek. There's no quotation marks in the original languages. And so whenever you see quotation marks in your script, they're guessing when the quotes start and when they end. They're guessing. There's no other way to know. That's the only way. It's not their fault. It's just something, in order to discover, you just have to try and guess where the quotation is. There's no end quotation mark. And so that's one that I think all quotations should be in parentheses, because we really don't know. Another one. You singular versus you plural. English, unlike almost every other language on earth, does not signify between you singular and you plural. Except in the South where we say y'all, right? In the North they say you guys sometimes. But proper English just says you when it's talking about you, and you when I'm talking about all of you. Greek, like almost every other language, and Hebrew are not like that. They have you plurals, right? They have a separate word, a separate form, like y'all, when they want to talk about you plural. This is significant. Genesis 1, we're gonna do a few examples here from Genesis 3, because knowing the original languages is vital for Genesis. All right, in Genesis 3, the serpent is talking to Eve, and he says, "Did God really tell you, do not eat of any tree of the garden?" Right? And then he says, in the day that she says, "No," he said, "not to eat of this tree. From the day that we eat of it, we will surely die." Satan says, "You surely will not die, for God knows that in the day that you eat of it, you will be like God, knowing good from evil." All of those yous are you plurals. All of those yous are you plurals. You would have no idea just reading it in English. What does that mean? It means that from the very beginning of the conversation, Adam was there. Some people like to say, because at the end of verse 3 it says, "And Eve gave to Adam who was with her." Well, some people say, well, that means Adam was with her when she ate the fruit, but not necessarily when she was talking to Satan. If you know the original languages, you know that is false. Adam was there the whole time, which makes a big impact on how you view the sin that happened. The sin was primarily Adam's now, because he was there.
So you're saying they should translate it, y'all?
Yes. But that's a good point. I think, what do you do? I mean, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. That's what he's saying. He was saying, in the day that y'all eat of it, y'all will surely die. That was really what he was saying. All right? Now, here's my favorite, all right? Wordplay. This is the biggest tragedy, one of the biggest tragedies of translation. The Bible uses wordplay all the time. All the time. And it's completely missed in English. And it's not the translator's fault. It's impossible to translate wordplay because our words sound different. Wordplay is when you use words that sound the same or that have hidden meanings, right? Okay, so let me give you some pretty cool examples of wordplay. There's 2 examples of wordplay in Genesis 3:1. All right, look at that little Hebrew snippet I gave you. By the way, you read it from right to left, so don't start on the end there with that square. Start on the right with that kind of staff-looking thing. All right, it's called a vav. All right, or a wow. Either way, some people call it a wow. All right, it says Va'achanakash, and the serpent Chaya was Aron, crafty. Va'achanakash Chaya Aron, and the serpent was crafty. All right, that word Aron is almost identical to the word we have in the verse before in Genesis 2:25, where it says the man and his wife were both arum, naked. The word naked and the word crafty are one vowel off. All right, and so does this have theological significance? I haven't been able to figure it out if it does. Right? Maybe it does, but I don't know of any. But it sounds cool. In the original Hebrew, it would have said the man and his wife were both arum, and the serpent, and were not ashamed, and the serpent was more arum than any other beast of the field. And there's no way you can catch that in English. He's making a play on words. He's choosing words based on the fact that they rhyme with each other. Right? Hebrew is extremely poetic, even more than Greek. Hebrew is an extremely poetic language, and you miss it all in English. All right. Another example of wordplay is what we were talking about later in the story of David. Right? Va'achanakash. Nakash is serpent. Bronze is nakoshet. It adds a T on the end. That is the Hebrew version of a T. That is the only difference between the two. And so whenever Goliath was being described as having a nakoshet shield, a nakoshet breastplate, a nakoshet greaves, I think it is, from head to helmet, from head to toe, this guy is nakash. This guy is serpent. Right? And so they would have immediately read serpent when they would have read that passage, and we completely miss it because we don't speak the language. All right, now here's some cool ones. Names. Names in the Bible almost always have meaning. Almost always have meaning, and we miss it every time because it's a name. We just give you the name. All right, Hosea. Hosea is the most famous example of names having meaning probably in the Bible. One of the most. It says, I will sow her for myself. Or it could be the sons, one or the other. He says, call her no mercy. Call her no mercy. That's her name. And that word is lo rukama. Right? And what the ESV does is it says, look, it is too important for the meaning of this verse for people not to get what those names mean. So instead of wording it as a name, we're just going to translate it. See what they did there? So they said, we're just going to say no mercy. But then the problem is there, you don't see that he's talking about the names of Hosea's children. Right? So it misses the whole symbolism of why he named his children those things. The L-E-E actually, I think, did the best job of translating. I have no idea what the L-E-E is. I found it and it did great. All right, look at this. Look what they do. They say, I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. No mercy. And then it puts the name in parentheses, right, to show you that this is actually a name. I will say to those who are not my people, lo ami, puts in parentheses, you are my people. That's about the best you can do there, right? It includes the fact that it's a name and that it has meaning to it. But here's an example from Ruth where they don't show you that it has meaning, and this is a typical example. These are all over Scripture. Almost every name in the Old Testament especially has to do, but also in the New Testament, right? Peter, rock, right? Has to do with his function in the church. Upon this rock I will build my church. And so there's some of this in the Greek as well, but it's most famous in the Hebrew. Look at this from Ruth. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. There are two examples of extreme irony and two examples of foreshadowing in the first two verses of Ruth that you will never get in English. Two examples of irony and two examples of foreshadowing. The irony is this. Anyone know what Bethlehem means? It comes from two Hebrew words meaning Bet Lechem. Beit Lechem, I should say. Or Bayit. Bayit Lechem. House is Bayit. Lechem is bread. The house of bread. There was a famine in the land of Israel, and Elimelech left the house of bread. Right away, if you're reading this in the original language, you're thinking, this guy is an idiot. Right? That's what you're supposed to think. This guy has just left the house of bread in a time of famine. Next thing of irony is what Elimelech's name means. It means God is king. God is king. And so this man whose name means God is king is disobeying the king's law by going to foreigners, going to a pagan country in the midst of a famine instead of trusting in his God the king. And so he not only doesn't believe his name, but he leaves the house of bread. He goes to a pagan country in the middle of a time of famine and trusts in his own thinking instead of the king. Two things of irony. Right away, the Hebrew reader is thinking, this guy is an idiot. He doesn't even believe in what his own name means, and he's leaving a house of bread in the time of famine. And the next two things of foreshadowing are the names of his son, Mahlon and Chilion, which their names mean weak and feeble, or sickly and feeble. Okay, what do we know immediately? These two are about to die. Right? These guys are not going to last. They are not good, strong sons. And that's exactly what happens. They both die in the land of Moab. All right? Is that interesting to you or what? I mean, this is beautiful, interesting stuff that goes straight over our heads. And then just a couple more things I threw in there at the end there. The word Christ. For example, Matthew 1:1 opens up to the record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. That is not his last name. I know I say that a lot. Christ means Messiah. If you know the original languages, you know that a Messiah means anointed one. If you know that Messiah means anointed one, and you know your Hebrew traditions, who is anointed in the Hebrew custom? Kings? Who else?
Priests.
Priests? Who else? Prophets. Isn't that beautiful? Here is Jesus, the Messiah, the fulfillment of the Old Testament office of priest, prophet, and king. Here is our priest, prophet, and king. Isn't that something? And the last one we talked about in Bible study, right? Armageddon sounds like this big scary word that our culture has done some pretty funny things with. If you know the original languages, you know it means Armageddo, the hill country of Megiddo. It's just a name of a place in Israel, right? It doesn't have any crazy eschatological meaning. It's just a name of a place, right? And here's one last one I wanted to show you that's not in your notes to end it all. This is also one of those things that's just lost in translation. Everyone open. Does anyone have a Bible here? On their phone maybe? If you have it, pull it up. This is cool. You're going to want to see this.
I only have ESV.
Now you don't want to read it. Huh? That's okay. Go to John 1. John 1. Is everyone in John 1?
Yes, sir.
Almost.
Sorry,
Alright. Okay.
I was distracted.
John.
I just one of the things I've been translating. Everybody there? Yes? Okay. Look at verse 3. Everything was. Whenever I pause, you fill in where I'm missing. Everything was. Read for me.
Wait,
Made.
John 1.
Made.
John 1, made. Very good. Everything was made through him. We see it again later in John 3. Just follow with me here. Without him, not one thing was made, which was made. So that's 3 times we've got that word made so far in the first 3 verses. Then in verse 6, it's used again. A man was what? Or there was a what? There was a man, right? Is that what it says in the ESV? All right. In the original languages, it's the exact same word used as that everything was made through him. A man was made, right? So that's 4. Then in verse 9, but it's translated what? Just there was a man, right?
Sent from God.
Yeah, sent from God. There was a man that was. They just translated it as a to be verb. All right, and then in verse 9, that same exact word is used again. He was in the world, and the world was made through him. That's 5 times. Then in verse 12, it's used again. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to what? What does your version say? 12. What?
Become.
To become.
Yeah.
Exact same word. So I translated to be made in order to be consistent. Right? There's 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In verse 14, the word was what? Or the word what?
Became.
Became, same word. The word was made flesh, is how I translated it. Verse 15. This was the one of whom I said, the one coming after me ranks before me, right? Nothing to do with ranking there. That's the word, same exact word. He was made before me. He was made before me. There's 8 times. Verse 17. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth, what?
Came.
Same word. Were made, I translated it, through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only begotten God, the one being at the chest of the Father, what?
He is made.
What?
He is made known.
Made him known. Same word. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times the same Greek word, ginomai is the word, is used in the first 18 verses of the book of John. It's translated probably about 4 or 5 different ways in your text. I understand why they did that. When you say a man was, there was a man, it sounds a lot better than a man was made. Right? It's much more smooth. Right? When you say he gave them the right to become children of God, it makes a little more sense than he gave them the right to be made children of God. The reason I translated the same in all of those cases, which, by the way, this is just stuff I noticed while translating. No one taught me this. It's just the stuff you'll pick up that you will never be able to pick up in English. The reason I did it the same is because I believe the author is trying to emphasize something. Obviously, when you use the same word, which is not necessarily a very common word, 10 times in 18 verses, he is taking extreme measure to emphasize that God is the maker that Jesus is the maker of all things. It's not only mentioned there in verse 1, but the whole thrust of this passage is on this word made. This is the key verb of the whole first chapter of John. That God has made all this. That God made the world. That He made John. He made the world. He made John. He made the world again. He's allowed us to be made into children of God. He made Jesus flesh. Jesus was made before or priority over John. Grace and truth were made through Jesus, and Jesus has made the Father known. Isn't that cool? And when you translate it as 4 or 5 different things in English, you totally miss it. And so yes, my version is choppy. It's not as smooth. But someone can now read it and see what the Greeks would have seen. Look, the emphasis is here. Look how many times he's using that word made. And so, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that cool? That's just something I noticed last night at midnight while I was texting Mitchell. I mean, these are the kind of things you will notice as you see. You'll notice what the original text has to offer that we can't get in English. And so, that is my hour-long spiel on why you should not quit this summer. All right, we are at the halfway point. I'm about to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come actually learn the alphabet. We will be out of here by. Here's why we do need to learn to pronounce the letters, is because we have to be able to talk about words. Like when I read to you from John 1, you have to be able to pronounce logos and theos and these words in order to ask questions about them. In order to learn words, you have to be able to talk about them. So that's the only reason why we have to be able to know how they sound. All right, so that we can read it to each other and ask questions to each other. All right, so let's get started. The Greek alphabet is very, very similar to the English alphabet. All right, this is a huge advantage. It's unlike the Hebrew, which is very different. All right, it begins with alpha, which corresponds to our English vowel A. Right, except that there's no long alpha. It always makes the same sound, A. Right. I'm trying to think of some words with alpha. Let's turn back to our sentence over here. It makes more like a ah. It's hard to distinguish between it and the short O. So, for example, in John 1, NRK, it's like a short English A.
Like a pasta.
Yeah, there you go. Pasta. Write down pasta. Right there.
Right now.
That's exactly what it's like. Pasta. All right.
Now I'm gonna think alpha means pasta.
All right.
Pasta. Okay.
All right. The next one is beta. All right. Alpha, beta. If you can't get those first two, you may as well go home now. All right. That's about the easiest it's going to get. Alphabet. We get our word alphabet from the first two words of the Greek alphabet. Alpha, beta. All right. It makes the same sound as an English B. All right. Maybe a little softer, like a little more like of a Spanish B, but just pronounce it like an English B. That's totally fine. All right. The next one is gamma. This is where it gets a little weird. It skips to G instead of C. All right. This is equivalent to the English G. The only note you may want to make next to gamma that's significant is when you get back-to-back gammas. Oh, by the way, you see the first one I'm putting is a capital and the second one is the undercase, right? I don't really care if you learn the capitals. It's mainly there's very few capitals. It's mainly the undercases that you need to learn.
Is
All right.
it like just the G sound?
Yes.
Is there a different sound for the J sound?
It's just the G. It's just the G. It's a hard G. It's a hard G. But when you have two back-to-back, for example, the word angel is actually alpha, gamma, gamma. But it's not agel. When you have two back-to-back, the first one becomes an N. So just know, when you have two back-to-back, the first one becomes an N. So instead of agelos, it's
Gs.
angelos. Two G's, when you have two gammas back-to-back, the first one is pronounced as an N. That's why it's angelos instead of agelos. And that's true for many words. Anytime you see back-to-back gammas, the first one's pronounced like an N. The next one is D. Dawid would be an example. It's just like the English D. It's called delta. Sorry, it's called delta. You should be writing down the names. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Right? That's where it should fall in the English alphabet, right? A, B, C, D. If the gamma is replaced by C, that's where the D would come. And the next one should be an E, right? And that's what we've got. Except this is called an epsilon.
Can you spell that?
E-P-S-O? No, E-P-S-I-L-O-N. E-P-S-I-L-O-N. Epsilon. It's pronounced like a short E. All right, like N. E-N, like end. Like the word end. So make sure you're circling your vowels or doing something to show you which ones are vowels, because there's more vowels than there is in English.
Sorry, what are the vowels so far?
Alpha and epsilon.
Okay.
All right. Then you've got three that rhyme, okay? That do not correspond to the English. Eta, zeta. I'm sorry. Zeta, eta, theta. Zeta, eta, theta. Z-E-T-A is zeta. Z-E-T-A. Eta is E-T-A. And theta is T-H-E-T-A. Zeta, eta, theta. All right? Pretty easy. T-H-E-T-A. All right, so the first one is a zeta. It's pronounced like a Z, just like the English Z. Nothing special there. The next one, though, is a little confusing for most people at first, okay? It looks kind of like, the lowercase letter kind of looks like an N, right? It's pronounced like a long E. That's why it's called an eta, A. Or You know, for example, it's pronounced like a long U or a long A. I'm trying to think of a word in English. Hay. It's pronounced like hay, basically. H-A-Y, that A, that's how it's pronounced. Okay? But it's technically a long E. So your short E is epsilon and your long E is eta. Those are your two E's. That make sense? Cool. So that's your third vowel. The next one is theta. And it is pronounced like a TH. 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 Got it? Nothing special about that one. The next one is called iota. 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 Okay? It's kind of a weird I-O-T-A. Iota. Alright? Most people would pronounce that iota. I used to pronounce it iota. But the short I makes the sound of E. Short I makes the E sound. Like P. That's the best one that came to mind. Fee, P, however you want to say it. Lee. That's the noise it makes. And so that's why instead of iota, it's iota. Iota. So you may want to just put like a E-E-O-T-A in parentheses to tell you how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
It's pronounced iota.
So the lowercase one?
It's technically it's a lowercase I, but it's pronounced either way. It's pronounced iota. It's your I.
Spanish I.
Yeah, it's like a Spanish I. It's very true. It's very true. Do you guys have helpful reminders or helpful hints? Throw them out. Throw them out. The next one is a K. Kappa. K-A-P-P-A. And it's pronounced just like an English K. And it's used like an English K. It's a very simple one. The next one is a lambda. L-A-M-D-A. Lambda. Pronounced just like an English L.
Is iota a vowel too?
Iota is a vowel. Iota. Trying to think if there's anything special about a lambda. I don't think there is.
What about eta? Is that about two?
Yep. Alpha, epsilon, eta, and iota so far. We've got a short A, a short E, a long A, and a short I.
Gotcha.
Which is really your only I.
Yeah.
Actually. You can make a note to say iota is your only I. There's no long I. I don't think. If we get to one later, I'll just tell you I'm wrong. Alright. Next one. Mu. M-U. Mu. Or mu, I guess you could say. I just say mu. Mu is fine. Either way, I don't care. Mu, I think it is pronounced mu, but it's spelled M-U. Alright? Used just like an English M. It looks weird though. It looks like a U with a little thing dipping down, a little teardrop on it, right?
It can be a weird M.
Yeah, I suppose. The next one also looks nothing like it's pronounced. It's an N. It's a nu. It's like you see the capital N? That's simple to remember, but the short, the non-capital, what do you call non-capital? Lowercase?
Lowercase.
The lowercase nu is difficult to recognize. You just got to remember V, you got to just think V equals N. It's like a slanty V. All right? Stop me if I'm going too fast or if you have any questions. Next one is a Xi. X-I. Xi. Once again, the tendency is going to pronounce it Xi, but it's not. It's Xi, like iota, Xi. And it's pronounced just like an X. This one is hard to tell apart from the Z, right? The X and the Z. The only difference is it has an extra pigtail, little loop-de-loop at the top there. You see it? See the difference? Go up and look at your Z.
Oh, yeah.
It's very similar to the Z. It's an X. So those are the last two, so it's a good way to remember. They look very similar. All right, your next one is Omicron. O-M-I-C-R-O-N.
Say it again.
O-M-I, C-R-O-N. Cron. Where is it cron? I think it's cron. I think it's Omicron. That is a lowercase o. And it is pronounced a lot like that lowercase a. In fact, almost identical, but like for example, logos. That is the lowercase o. It's pronounced like log. Okay? So just put log there. Make sense?
Yeah. A lot of people try to get it.
A lot like pasta. It's very similar. All right. What are you laughing at?
Just don't know what some people are trying to get. I'm just like, oh, me.
All right. The next one is P. P-I. Not pie. In English, we say pie. I know we want to say pie when you see that sentence. It is. Remember, the I is pronounced like an E. It's P. All right, but it's spelled P-I, and it makes the sound of a P. Pretty simple.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So just everyone recognizes that as a mathematical symbol pi, right?
Yes.
So it should be easy to remember. The first sound of the word pi is a P. All right. The next one is R. The next one looks like what?
Yeah.
That's your R.
Oh.
And it's
Why?
pronounced, and it's spelled R-H-O, row. Now the question is, why did we turn it into a P, right? When it should have been an R. It started with them. All right, that's a row. And it's pronounced just like an R. The next one is your first S. Well, that's actually your only S, but there's a PS that's coming later. All right, so that's your S. It's called sigma. S-I-G-M-A, sigma. Sigma. Okay, you notice that there's 3 characters there instead of 2 on your page. Does everyone notice? Yeah?
Yeah.
That's because the first one's your uppercase, your capital. Next one is your lowercase. Your last one is your final form S. You need to make a note of that. Final form.
What is final form?
Final form means when it comes at the end of a word, it looks like that. I don't know why they do that. It is dumb. I'm sure someone could give me a good answer. But like I said, I'm not a Greek expert. And so I just know that that's what it looks like when it comes at the end of a word. That one looks more like a normal S, doesn't it? Don't you think? The final form?
But it goes like, it would go at the bottom of the line.
It does. It goes under the line. That's correct. The second part goes under the line.
So is the end of a word, is that the far left side or the far right side?
No, Greek is read normally. Greek is left to right. It's Hebrew that's right to left.
Gotcha.
All right? Next one is Tau, T-A-U, and it means T. It sounds like a T.
T-A-U?
T-A-U, town. Which is a diphthong, which we're going to get to. The next one is Upsilon. Upsilon.
How do you spell that?
U-P-S-I-L-O-N. Upsilon. Upsilon or Upsilon. I don't care which way you pronounce it. And it is the oo sound. That's right. The word sun is huyos. Hu, ooh, ooh. It has an H in front, so ooh. So put like, what are some good words we could use? Who? Is that what you're going to say? Food, fool,
I pity the fool.
food. That's good. Put food. Food is the best. It sounds like food.
So it's Upsilon.
Oh, I thought it
Upsilon.
was like WH.
That is your only. That is your only U. That is your only U. Okay. You may want to make a note of that. Next 3 sound very similar. All right. So if you're looking at this like in English, like the English alphabet, the next one will kind of be like your W. The next one your X. The next one your Y, and the next one your Z. Right. These are your last 4. But that's not. Doesn't mean that's the sound they make. I'm just saying that's where we're at in the alphabet. So it goes Phi, Ki, Psi. Phi, Ki, Psi. That's your next 3 letters. All right. It's not Phi, Chi, Psi. All right. It's Phi, Ki, Psi. So that first one is P-H-I, Phi, P-H-I, and it's pronounced like a P-H or an F. Just put F.
Okay.
All right. It's very simple. The next one is a key. It's pronounced like a C. I want you to look at that one as a C. If kappa is your K, then that X right there, which is a key. Oh, C-H-I, by the way, C-H-I. is pronounced like, it's not like chi though. It's pronounced ki. And when you see that, I want you to pretend like it's a C. It makes pretty much the same sound as capital. Alright? So don't get that one confused with your X. Your X, remember, your C looks more like a squiggly, funky letter E.
It looks like a little time, sand time.
Yep, the capital does. The capital does, it's true. But remember, pay more attention to the lowercase. Capitals are good to know, but what I'm saying is if you can only learn one by next week, you've got to know the lowercase. Alright. Your next one is C. This is a cool letter. We don't have it in English. It's a PS. Like lips. Go ahead and put lips and circle the PS at the end of lips.
So it's just PS?
How do you spell it?
Oh, sorry. PSI. C. PSI, C. And it's pronounced PS. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's cool. I mean, I like that they have this letter. It's kind of the difference between English and Greek. And the last one, everyone knows.
Zeta.
Nope. Omega.
Oh.
Alpha and Omega. Take that out of the recording.
Okay.
Alright, Omega. And it's pronounced like a long O. O. So, throw. I don't know. Throw.
Bro.
Bro, yeah.
That's what it is.
Alright, so somebody tell me the first, all the vowels, and also tell me how they're pronounced. Start from the beginning. Tell me all the vowels.
Alpha.
Alright, stop. We're gonna do it one at a time. Chris, Alpha, how's it pronounced?
Ah.
Good. Shelby, what's the next one?
Epsilon.
Good. How's it pronounced?
N, like now. N.
Like end, like a eh. Good. John?
Iota.
Yada. Yeah. That's important because we're about to learn diphthongs, but you haven't learned it yet, so it's okay. Good. It's E. Good. Hold on. I'm gonna put Reagan next.
Omicron.
Okay.
And it says off, like log.
Good.
It's similar to the alpha.
Good. Mitchell?
Would it be Upsilon or Upsilon, whatever you said?
Yep. Yep.
Nice.
How's it pronounced?
Like a oo.
Good. And Lauren?
Omega.
Good. Very good. Those are your vowels. Do not forget them. All right. Turn the page.
I was wrong.
Is there any questions on the alphabet?
Is Ada not a vowel?
Ada.
Oh, we skipped Ada.
Oh, it is a vowel?
Ada is a vowel.
I did too.
Ada is a vowel. And it's pronounced like a long A or a long E. Like a Spanish E is how it's pronounced. You know Spanish.
Oh,
Right? Like,
I just missed that part.
all right. Those are your vowels. Do not forget them. There's 2 E's, there's 2 O's, there's 1 A, 1 I, and 1 U. Right? Okay. Diphthongs. This is when you have 2 vowels back to back. You do not pronounce each of them in full strength. It is not I-E. It is I. You blend them together. We do this in English too, sometimes, right? But in Greek, it's consistent. It's actually easier than English. You don't have to wonder how to pronounce these 2 vowels when they're together. There's no rule breakers, okay? There's no, weird words where it's like, that should not be pronounced that way. Just pronounce it like a diphthong. So A-I is pronounced I. I-E, I-E, I-E. It kind of it rolls from the A to the I. I-E. Someone give me an example. Aisle. Aisle. A-I-S-L-E. That's an English diphthong of A and I. So we do the same thing in English. Aisle. Right? Alright, next one. How do you think that one's pronounced? I'm going to let you guys figure these out. Chris, you're up first. First, what does the first one make? What does the epsilon make?
What's epsilon? A.
Good. And what does the iota make? What does the iota make?
Oh,
Iota.
I don't remember.
See, if you can't figure it out from your notes now, you won't be able to figure it out at home. So this is good.
Yeah, I didn't write that one down.
Oh, you didn't write that one down?
Is that the... Wait, what is that?
It makes like a long E. E.
E.
Iota. It's the little I. You see the little I?
I think Here, this one.
Shelby, can you help
Then
me
what
find
is Eta mean?
Ada.
Ada.
A. The long,
A.
the Ada is like an A and the Iota is like an E.
Oh, okay.
So you got E and E. If you blend them together, what's it going to sound like?
Like hey or
Hey.
day.
Good. A. All right. What's an example? You know what? Let me pull out the grammar that I take this from. By the way, I'll do a little for our YouTube channel.
What are you trying to say?
So
I pulled heavily from this book in making these lessons. All right. This is David Black's Learn to Read New Testament Greek. And it has good examples of these
So it is
diphthongs in
not
English,
wrong.
so I'm going to use it for that.
No, it's a. Like,
Oh, you know
What?
what? It may have been. Nope, it does. Oh, that's a terrible example. Oh. Okay, the example they give is the name Irene. But that's a terrible example. Don't write that down. Just think.
What about vein? Like V-E-I-N?
Yeah, that's not even how it's pronounced.
Just the
It's
A,
pronounced
like
A.
play. Hey.
Yeah, I don't know why they
Vein.
put Irene. That's bad.
Yeah.
That's really bad.
Yeah. Game.
for E?
For the EI they put just put
Oh, for EI.
it's pronounced almost like a long A, but listen, it kind of rolls from the E to the I, right? A. It starts with that. Are y'all listening?
Oh, like vein? Kind of?
Vein! You hit it, man!
You said that earlier. Shelby
I
said
didn't
that.
hear you like vein. It kind of starts with the E and it goes to the I, right? A. All right. Next one. Next one's fun.
I'm
Is
pretty
it
smart.
oi?
Oi! Good job, Shelby.
Whatever,
Oi!
guys.
Oi. Oi. All right. Like boy with a B-O-I, right? All right. Like boing. Like the word boing. All right. John, you're next.
Human outside.
Ow. Good. Ow. Oh, no. I found where I was going wrong. I was looking on the wrong column. Here's the example he gives. First one, aisle, like I told you. Second one, the word eight. Why didn't we think of that? Eight.
For what?
E-I-G-H-T, right? It's the same. The word eight for the epsilon iota. The third one, oil. I think boing is a little funner, more fun. But you can put oil. Okay. Next one, the AU. John, what is it? Ow. Good. Ow.
Like,
He gives
Like owl?
kind of
Oh,
like owl.
it's like the ooh.
It's like tau, right?
Owl. Where's
The AU. Ow. The one we had. I can't think of any good English examples. The one he gives isn't good.
What does he say?
He says Faust. It's like a name. F-A-U-S-T. Faust. I never even heard of that author or that name.
Because it's more of an
Ow. Yeah. Or ow. Yeah. It's kind of like owl, honestly. Owl.
That's the only one I can
just gonna
think of
put
that has owl in it.
That's
Owl.
fine.
Besides
Put owl. Put owl.
Owl.
All right. Next one. Who wants it?
It's a lot to sing. Ow.
Ow. But
almost the
Think
same.
where's
Don't you say that?
but it's not that. It blends more. The AU. You talking about the AU or the OU?
No, the OU. It sounds
Okay.
like the AU, kind of, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's more like ooh. More like ooh.
Oh, okay.
Oh. Really, just pronounce that one ooh. That's how everyone pronounces it. Pronounce it like a ooh. The example they give here is soup, right? S-O-U-P.
Just put ooh.
Put soup. Soup. Hey, soup is a good example. All right. Who's got next? Mitchell?
We?
Good. Very good. Ooh.
No, you.
Sweet. S-U-I-T-E, right? Sweet. That's a great example.
Is it UI?
What did I say?
No, I was just asking.
Yeah, it's U-I. S-U-I-T-E. Sweet. The next one? The next one? Very close. Remember the U makes what sound? Ooh. Good, so it's what? U, right? Ooh, U. Good. Feud. Feud is the example they give. That's a good example. F-E-U-D. Feud. It starts off with a little bit of an E and then it goes into that U. Feud.
Wait,
So it's you?
like
You.
But it's
You.
two different
You.
ones.
You.
They
You.
both sound the same.
Oh, they
Feud.
both sound the same?
Say it just like you would say feud. And the last one is basically the same, except it's a little bit longer of an E. So AU, AU. But you don't see that one very often at all. You don't see that A to upsilon very often at all. All right. What do you think these next three are? Well, you have no idea. What, John?
Oh, never mind. I thought we were on the next one. I'm like, I don't.
We're on the next three. All right, listen. What we have there is something called a iota subscript. Iota subscript. What does subscript mean? It means written below the script, right? So it's written below the letter. Iota subscript. And it's an iota, right? So it makes sense that it's called that. It is not pronounced any differently. It is pronounced just like the letter on top. It's important, though. It is technically a diphthong. It's just not a pronounced. It's not one that changes the pronunciation. It's important because it's important in the formation of words. Like, for example, you'll have a word that will mean one thing with that subscript and one thing without it. So you got to be able to recognize it. But don't pronounce it. All right. Everybody ready to move on? Yes? Can I get yeses or no's?
Wait, what was? Sorry, what was the? What does this change?
It changes the meaning of the word. It does not change the sound at all. Just know that there's something called an iota subscript, and it will show up. You'll learn how to deal with it later. Cool?
Yeah.
Next thing, breathing marks. This is something that is foreign to English. This is totally new. All right? It looks like an apostrophe, and it is going to come on words that begin with vowels and words that begin, I believe, with the letter rho, the R. Okay? If it begins with a vowel or the letter rho, it's going to have a breathing mark. Not sometimes, it is going to have a breathing mark. You need to also write down that if the word starts with a diphthong, that it is going to be on the second vowel of the diphthong. It's going to take the apostrophe, the breathing mark.
Wait, can you say that again?
If the word begins with a diphthong, then it will go on the second vowel in the diphthong, not the first. But if it starts with a vowel that's not a diphthong or a rho, it goes on just that first vowel or that rho. It goes above it. Not off to the side, not before, but literally above the letter. Okay? What are you laughing at, Shelby?
I just forgot how to spell vowel for
Aha!
What were the two?
Happens to the best of
Row
us.
and what?
I think it's just rho is your only consonant. Other than that, it's
Oh.
vowels and diphthongs. Okay? Now let me tell you how they're pronounced. The first one is called a smooth breathing mark. It is not pronounced. It is silent. It's like the silent H in Spanish. Think of it that way. It's like a Spanish silent H.
So why is it there?
It is there to separate it from the rough breathing mark. I don't know. The rough breathing mark is pronounced like the English H. It is pronounced like an H. Ha. Let me give you an example. The word, a famous one is the word huios. It means sun. Huios. Huios. It starts with a diphthong. It actually starts with 3 back-to-back vowels. But when you have 3 vowels, it's not one long diphthong. It's a diphthong and then a vowel. Okay? So it's huios. So over the second vowel of that word, you've got your rough breathing mark. And although you know what? I think huios is a bad example because I think because there's 3, it might be over the U. But normally it's over the second one. Forget I said the huios thing. But that's just an example of how to pronounce it though. Huh. You'll have the word hen. You'll have all kinds of words. Right? If it starts with an R, you could have her. If it starts with an R, I think it's always a smooth. I don't think you're going to have a rough. But with vowels, you have rough breathing marks all the time. Just add an H to the beginning. All right, accent marks. We are not going to pronounce accent marks in this class. I have decided to disregard them. However, you will see them. That's why they're there. They're there so you know what they are. The first one, if you want to write this down, you can. The first one is called an acute accent mark. Acute because it goes up. The next one is called a grave, Grave, because it goes from top to bottom, it goes down. And the third one is called a circumflex, 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 an acute, a grave, and a circumflex. And they were originally tonal accent marks. We have no idea what that means in English, what that sounds like, because we use emphatic accent marks. We use accent marks, especially in Spanish, right, to know where to put the emphasis of the word. In English, we do it by sound. We don't have an accent mark. We just grow up hearing things and we just know where to put emphasis on it. But in Greek, they have tonal accents, which means that they would actually raise or lower the tone of their voice, the height or depth of their voice. Which tells us what about Greek?
It's a tonal language.
It was a very tonal, it was a very musical language. It was a very, elegant language, which we just don't know exactly how that works. But we know that I'm not going to ask you all to do it because it's going to sound ugly. All right? So
Hey, what's this?
there are a few occasions in which an accent mark affects the meaning of a word, but they are very few and far between. And so we're not going to focus on them. When you pronounce a word, as long as you get the vowels and the consonants right, I don't care if you're wrong on the accent. Because the only thing we need to be able to do is recognize the word. Okay? Alright, moving on. Punctuation marks. These are fairly important. Alright? When you read your Greek New Testament, let me change that. When you read your English New Testament, you're going to see all kinds of punctuation that is not in the Greek original text, because they used very little. Okay? They did not use this common punctuation, and they had bad grammar compared to today's grammar. For example, Pastor has mentioned that Ephesians chapter 1, verses, I believe it is 3 through 14, is one sentence in the Greek. Now that tells us something. It tells us it's one thought. So that's important. In English, some versions put up to like 14 sentences, periods in that space. Some versions put 3 or 4 and try and make it more like the run-ons of the original. But I don't know of any translation that actually just puts the Greek punctuation. I think that when we add punctuation, that's a part of the inspired text. I think that we need to, if we add it, put a little asterisk there, or put it in parentheses to let us know it's been added for the flow of the sentence. But most versions do not do that. Okay, so just know that most English punctuation is added, but there is still punctuation in the original manuscripts. It's just fewer and far between. So your first one looks like a comma, and it corresponds to the English comma. That's an easy one. Second one looks like a period, and it corresponds to the English period. That's an easy one. Now is when they get tricky, though. The rest are not so easy. The next one looks like a what?
Semicolon.
Semicolon. It is a question mark. That is a question mark. The next one looks like nothing in English, just a dot, right? Looks like a colon without the bottom part, right? Alpha, lambda, lambda, alpha, right? It means but. But here's when the apostrophe is used. It's used in order to avoid ending a word with a vowel and starting another word with a vowel. So if you have a word that ends in a vowel and the next word starts in a vowel, they'll take off the vowel from the end of the first word in order that it flows better. Okay? So instead of Allahu, well, that's a bad example because it has a rough breathing mark. Alright, so instead of Allah and then, what's the word that starts, when you want to think of a word, N, Allah N, right? Starts with a vowel. You would take off the A from the Allah and then put an apostrophe there and see Alen, right? It flows better instead of going vowel to vowel. And so anytime you see an apostrophe, you've got to think what letter is missing. And it's always going to be at the end of a word. What letter has been taken off this word? Because you've still got to identify what that word is. Does that make sense? Make sure you guys are writing down everything you need to remember what I'm telling you. Alright? And what questions do you have? We have gone over the alphabet, diphthongs, breathing marks, accent marks, and punctuation marks. Those are all the major punctuation marks that I know of, that I think you need to know. We've got 15 minutes left. Any questions on what we've covered? Chris?
In here, there's like a little squiggly line above a lot of the letters. Does that have any significance?
That is how the font that I used does the circumflex. That is the
Okay.
circumflex accent. Good question. So maybe by your accent marks, you may want to draw in a little tilde. It's a Spanish tilde, right? And call that the circumflex accent. Good question. Anything else you see that's throwing you off as you look at that pronunciation practice? It's all pretty straightforward. Cool. All right, well, let me just explain to you a little bit how things are going to work. On a normal week, I'll have several pages of homework, or at least a page of homework. This week, it's all your homework is memorization. Can't translate anything yet. And a little bit of pronunciation will do too. Listen up, we're not quite done. Listen, this is important. Then on a normal week, you'll do your homework, and we'll spend the first section of our class, instead of talking about why you should learn Greek, we'll spend it going over the homework. It may take up to an hour. We'll probably go over every sentence, and we'll make sure that you guys understood what you translated. That does not mean wait till you get here to do your homework and fill it in as we go over it. You need to do the homework so that you can ask questions about it. All right? Once that's done, that could take 10 minutes, could take an hour. We'll take our break, and then we'll start on the lesson for the next week. Does that make sense? And so next week, because we don't have homework, we'll start off by probably doing some pronunciation practice. I'll probably bring some sentences and have you pronunciate. The only reason why it is important for you to pronunciate, once again, is so that we can communicate and talk about words in Greek. If you can't pronounce them, there's no way we can talk about this word, that word. You just have to point, and we're not doing the whole pointy thing. No. We've at least got to be able to sound things out. All right, I'm not asking a lot here.